Today is February 19th, 2024, and it's probably about maybe what, 6 o'clock. And I'd say about 40 minutes ago, I was enjoying myself. Let's just listen to music. Songs came to my mind to look up, and I was viewing them on, YouTube music. And two songs actually came upon, uh, both by the Clark sisters. One is Twinkie Clark, Is My Living in Vain? And man, I just saw it and I was like, oh, I remember singing that when I was, in New Orleans. I was a teenager, late teens. Hadn't even gotten into my 20s yet. And then in my 20s in Georgia. But I was in New Orleans at the time and I was young. And young people are just that. They're young. They're busy trying to understand what's going on, try to pay attention, trying to do well, trying not to make any mistakes. And stuff is happening so fast, and life is moving so fast. You're just trying not to be run over, you know? And there are things you're learning. And so you're learning. You don't really have time to actually apply it or even understand it properly. You're learning it. So at this stage of my life, I've learned things already. I'm not learning, I've learned in the past tense. And I was listening to the song and I always liked the song. Yet at this point, that song has way more meaning. Is my living in vain? Praying in vain, and it's the labor. And when you're a young person, you haven't labored, you're laboring, you know, and you're getting to a point. And it's not that your life is easier than the next person or an older person. It's just that you're still doing life in a specific way. Whereas someone older than you, they're in a whole different space and how they're laboring. And they can look back on what they have done already. And so, man, as a believer, because I'm a follower of Christ, I, in this time frame, it's like, did I do it right? Did I get these things right? Not in the eyes of the people around me, because when you're younger, and I'm speaking for myself, I was trying to make sure that the leaders around me were happy with what I was doing. Was I doing it the way they wanted? Whether it was family members or people I respected, mentors, or whether ministry or work. Am I doing what they wanted? And at this point, I'm wondering, Lord, is it something you like? You know what I mean? Did I get that right as far as you're concerned? Um, the things that I've done, the experiences that I've had as a believer, as a Black woman, you know, a woman of God, in the ministry, as in professionally as well. That was a lot. It has been a great deal. Looking back, looking over it, because I'm still moving forward. I'm still going. Yet now versus back then, how I see is different. So the song brought all of that to me. And so I was moving on. I had a good time with that song, no doubt. Twinkie was getting down because it was the original versions. Um, and I wasn't, I was young when they were doing their thing. So somehow on my playlist, it's only had several things on the list. Uh, Karen Clark Shears, God is Here, got added. But I was like, I was checking out old school. But I was like, okay, I felt like just go ahead and listen to it. So I did. And as I listened to the song, I was like, oh man, Monique loved that song, Monique Mosley. And I enjoyed it too. And I remembered certain things and I started to realize I miss being in God's presence. Now, please don't make comments just yet. Just hold your thoughts and let me get to the end. It's not that God isn't with me because the Holy Spirit indwells, so that I don't have to wait for the Holy Spirit to come upon me. He lives with me. He's in me. He's with me every single moment of the day, every day. I mean, when we talk about going to places of worship, God is here, is what's, the presence of the Lord is here. Is it? Is he? Is he getting to be bigger than your life and fill the space? Not after praise and worship, but when you stepped across the threshold, you were like taken like, wow. And then you get quiet and then you start to change the running around or whatever because you get to exhale. And the song goes on about healing the brokenhearted and things like that and laying your burdens down. And do you get to feel like you're laying your burdens down when you go wherever you go as the minister or as the layperson or, in the pews that you can see behind me, or as, someone in service? But the point I'm making isn't to be argumentative because Yeshua, the Messiah, loves his people. So I'm going to love his people. I'm not going to make any bad comments or complain about them, no matter what they're doing, because if the Lord hasn't stopped you breathing, he still has a plan for resolution in all of our lives. I'm going to follow and be like Christ. That's my foundational process. Anyway, I think we should all take a look at whether or not we are creating an atmosphere for God to want to live and dwell in the places we call sanctuaries, the places we call church, the building pieces. And the thing that brought this to the forefront of my mind today was that song. And the Lord had me remember when I was in junior high school. Colton Junior High School off of St. Claude in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I would find my way to this church, and I don't remember what they call it in the Catholic faith, and it's probably like a chapel or a small cathedral because it was Catholic. I didn't know at the time, but it was really hard. Yes, high schoolers, middle schoolers, those junior high in the middle, between young adult and kid, they struggle. They have issues and concerns that weigh on their hearts and minds, their souls. So I had that, and I found my way. There was a need to go in there. It was like everything was too loud, and so I hadn't been to this place before, but I went in, and I promise you, when I crossed the threshold, there was like things just fell off. There was no singing. The priest wasn't even there. There was I couldn't see anybody. It was super quiet. And so I sat down because I didn't want to disturb anything. But what I felt, I wanted to soak whatever this was in. And I hoped I soaked enough in before they put me out. So I made myself real small and real quiet. It was empty, and I lost myself in the peace of it. And then this man came up, and I realized he was a priest. He looked at me, he nodded and kept walking. He said nothing. He didn't make me leave or anything. But as I sat, I realized that there were people in there, but there were women, people's grandmas, but they weren't in there just praying. They were cleaning. They were wiping the pews, like the ones, but even bigger and thicker, like the ones you see behind me. And the melody that they were doing, it wasn't words, but I could feel they were talking to God, right? And I found myself ending up at that place for about a year, at least once a day. If I can get there every day, I would. Whether I get in trouble for it or not, I'd spend an hour or more just not saying anything, just sitting there. Because God's presence was there. There was no singing. There was no praise and worship. There was no liturgy. There was no order of service happening. Just these women using old English shoe polish, I mean, not shoe polish, but wood polish, and in service to their God. And they didn't bother me, and I stayed out of their way, and they filled the space. But the pace, when they weren't there at times that I went, because they weren't there all the time, I was meeting God there. That's why I went so often, and I knew it. I didn't know how I knew it, but I knew it. So my thought for the day is really not to be embittered by what people aren't doing. It's to be aware if that's missing. What do you need to do to find the space to sit next to God in His presence, to know that God is here? What is it that you should do to build a space and make room for God to truly be there? Thank you for listening to me, and I appreciate all of you. I ask that the Lord would make this week, this month, one that is fulfilling, maturing, and exciting, hopeful, exciting for all of you. May the Lord keep you and have His face shine upon you. God bless all of you. Later.